Former USA Soccer great Landon Donovan joining us on the program. Landon, how's morale today?
Not good, Dan. Not good.
What did you see last night?
Well, the most disturbing part for me was the lack of urgency displayed. We all know sports. Anything can happen. You can lose games. That's all part of it. But the lack of urgency to really understand what was at stake was really disheartening for me. And candidly, it was really hard to watch.
How did we get here?
Well, that's the bigger piece of all this, right? It should never come down to having to score one goal in Trinidad to get to the World Cup, although we've, in our history, we've had to do that. But I think we're past those days where that should happen. The reality is we lost 2 games at home in qualifying, which I'm not a statistician, but I don't know the last time that happened. And we lost a game in Trinidad against a team that had nothing to play for. And so that's sort of the reality of the situation. And it's unacceptable in every way, and it's disappointing, and we got what we deserve. I mean, if you can't win more games at home in qualifying and you can't beat Trinidad in a game that matters for us and doesn't for them, then you don't deserve to go to the World Cup. Simple as that.
Are we further behind than we were 10 years ago?
Well, listen, all these things go in cycles. Sports always go in cycles like that. However, we should never be in a situation where we're having this discussion today about not going to the World Cup. So in that sense, you have to say yes, because this is a results business. If you look at the big picture, I would say we're not doing something right. If we're coming down to the last game in Trinidad where we have to get a point to qualify, we have to score a goal to qualify. So are we worse off? Yeah, probably. And sometimes in situations like this, in the long run, not today, but in the long run, maybe this is the best thing that can happen. So we can all take a step back and reevaluate and reassess and figure out how we avoid this ever happening again.
If you ran USA Soccer, what would you do? What would be the top priority for you?
Well, there are so many priorities, and I'll just start by saying I know there's a lot of heat on Sunil Gulati today, a lot of heat on Bruce Arena, a lot of heat on all the people involved with this sport. Let's not forget that none of these things are easy, and if you're on the outside looking in, it's always easy to pick apart what you think is wrong. So I'll preface it with all that. I think the biggest issue in our country probably is that we have too many kids that don't play soccer because they can't afford it, or they don't have the support, or they drop out of soccer because they're burnt out because of coaches that are overbearing or parents that are overbearing. I think we're missing out on too many quality players. And that's the starting point for all of it. What happens when you're a teenager, and then when you're in, your late teens and early 20s, and professionally, that's all different. But the crux of it for me would be to start there and work your way up and figure out how to make that part better.
He's Landon Donovan, former USA Soccer star. How were you developed into maybe the greatest, soccer player we've ever had developed?
Well, I was a little bit in, Clint Dempsey, Tim Howard to some extent. Michael Bradley was the exception because he had a dad who understood what it was all about, so he got proper coaching and proper guidance. But for all of us, we were a little bit lightning in a bottle, and we sort of just made it on our own. But you can't depend on that, right? That's not a recipe for success. Mm-hmm. So I was developed because I just was a dork at school who carried a soccer ball around all day and kicked it against a wall. And that's how I got developed. But we can't rely on those types of things. So in other sports in our country, generally a good place to start is just by having kids who care about it and who are willing to, go shoot baskets in the gym for 4 hours every night and those types of things. But if you really want to be successful long term, that's not how you develop people. So, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Dan?
you can.
Did you? I'm assuming you didn't watch the game, but did you? What's the reaction you get from? Is it people are sort of don't care, or I know Paulie cares, but what's the overall feeling?
I think
Sort of in the sports world.
I think that you're finding a lot more support and therefore disappointment with this. People who don't like soccer don't care about it, but the casual fan, I think, would have watched the U.S. in the World Cup because there was 3 matches that you get to see. But I think that there's genuine disappointment today from these fans who expected more. And, that's just gauging what we've gotten phone call-wise, emails, and tweet-wise, that there is genuine disappointment and maybe frustration with where we are with this soccer program. Because I said it's sort of like if I look at Trinidad and Tobago, that's like San Diego. So the entire United States couldn't beat San Diego, and that's where people can't wrap their arms around this and say, how is that possible?
Yeah. No, that's fair, and that's the fair way to look at it because we have two. And in the past, it was we have this massive country with all these people who come from all different parts of the world who understand the sport, and so we should be able to succeed just on that alone. Now we have resources combined with all that. So now you say, how is it remotely possible that? And forget about just Trinidad. It's how do we not beat Costa Rica at home, and how do we, not do better against some of these other teams at home or away? And I think that's where it's hard for people to figure out. And I'm always I lived it and I was part of it, so I'm careful not to throw people under the bus. But the reality is it's unacceptable, right? And it's disappointing. I didn't talk to Paulie much. We just texted. Paulie, what were your feelings on all of it?
I think it was shocking how it played out in real time, not just that the USA lost to Trinidad and Tobago, but certain other things had to play out in real time with other national squads to keep us out of it. So, a half an hour earlier, it didn't feel urgent. And then you're like, it's really happening. And then you're sitting there after the match going, oh, the next 5 years, there's really nothing to talk about with USA Soccer.
Yeah, that's a fair point because it's, even until the last 10 minutes, we were still in the World Cup. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, Panama scores, and you're just trying to wrap your mind around, wow, this is really happening, and you kind of feel like you're in a fog. It was a perfect storm. I mean, Panama score in the last few minutes. Honduras beat Mexico, which you would never expect. We have a crazy own goal that goes in off Omar Gonzalez, and the guy hits a shot of his life from Trinidad. And so, but I guess the bigger point is you can't put yourself in that situation, and that's what they did.
Do you think Mexico's enjoying this?
Well, Dan, 4 years ago, Mexico were out of the World Cup looking in on the last day. We went to Panama, or the U.S. team went to Panama, and if they beat Panama, Mexico would qualify for the World Cup. We had already qualified, and we ended up beating Panama and did them a favor. Last night, Mexico, unfortunately, did not return the favor. So I'm sure there are large swaths of their population that are happy with it. But I got a lot of tweets and messages from people saying, listen, I'm Mexican and Mexican-American, and I'm really sad that we're not going to see the U.S. in the World Cup. It makes the World Cup more fun and more exciting. So it's a sad day.
I'll talk to you in 4 years, okay?
I appreciate that. It's so kind of you.
Thank you, Landon. That's the great Landon Donovan.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.